Now, from Wish TV, your local news source, this is All Indiana Politics.
Good morning. Welcome to another edition of All Indiana Politics. I'm Phil Sanchez. We start today with former Vice President and former Indiana Governor Mike Pence. He's on a nationwide tour for his new book, So Help Me God. The tour included a book signing and audience question and answer session Tuesday in Indianapolis. The book comes as Pence pushes toward a run for president in 2024. Our Danielle Zulkowski spent time with him downtown.
Danielle, it's just such a privilege for me to have the opportunity to tell our story to the American people in my book, So Help Me God. It was a labor of love. We moved home to Indiana a year ago last spring, and I spent a lot of long hours reflecting on the opportunities that I've had growing up in a small town here in Indiana, dreaming someday of serving in Congress, learning lessons along the way, coming to my Christian faith, meeting the woman of my dreams, raising a family, and then being able to serve in the Congress, and then as governor, and then as Vice President of the United States. But all along the way, Indiana's been the center of all that we've been and all that we've done. And being here today at the Indiana Historical Society, seeing so many great Hoosiers come out and take an interest in our work is very humbling to me, because everything I've done in my life I owe to my faith in God, my family, and the people of Indiana.
Yeah, so with this book, it does provide that contrast from January 6th, from where you stand versus where, you know, our former president stands. Do you think that the Republican Party kind of has two factions going on in it right now? Well,
I must tell you, in writing So Help Me God, it was, I thought it was important that we tell the whole story. I mean, I couldn't be more proud of the record of the Trump-Pence administration. I mean, in less than 4 years, we rebuilt our military, we revived our economy, created 7 million jobs, we secured our border, became energy independent, and saw hundreds of conservatives appointed to our court, including 3 Supreme Court justices. And to have been a part of that was a great honor for me. Obviously, the administration did not end well. January 6th was a tragic day, but I want people in Indiana that read So Help Me God to know that I'm incredibly proud of the record of the Trump-Pence administration. I speak candidly about both why we took the stand that we took on that tragic day in January of 2021, but also I like to point to how I arrived at that place, from my upbringing here in Indiana, my family, my faith, my devotion to the Constitution, and I hope people find in that story a great sense of pride about what I learned here growing up in Indiana, and how we put that into practice in good times and in challenging times in serving all the people of this country.
Do you think having two kind of camps in the Republican Party right now affected the 2022 election and maybe less of a red wave than people had expected?
Well, Danielle, when I look at the results of the midterm elections, and I traveled to 35 states around the country campaigning for candidates for Congress, for the Senate, and also for governors, the common denominator that I see is that candidates that were focused on the future, candidates that were focused on dealing with the issues that the American people are struggling with, which is the high cost of living, the high cost of gasoline and energy, the crisis at our border, and crime in our cities. Those candidates that were focused on the future did quite well in this election, but candidates that were focused on the past, candidates that were focused on relitigating the last election did not fare as well. And so I think the enduring lesson from 2022 and going forward is that the Republican Party needs to be the party of the future. And when we articulate a bold agenda about how we put into practice all the policies that worked to make America stronger and more prosperous during the Trump-Pence years, I think the American people will rally to our cause.
One more question, Dana.
When it comes to the Supreme Court clearing the way to allow the House committee to take a look at Trump's taxes, do you believe that he should have to hand them over, and would you hand yours over?
Well, I obviously we released our tax returns when I was running for Vice President of the United States. And, we respect the pronouncements of the Supreme Court. My hope the new Congress is focused on the issues that really matter most to the American people. I think Look, as I go to the grocery store here at the Kroger in Indiana, or stop at the gas station, or as I travel around the country, I mean, the American people are hurting. I see people struggling to make ends meet in this economy that's now in a recession. I see people struggling with the high cost of gasoline. I see people concerned about a border that's seen 5 million people come into our country illegally, and a flow of fentanyl that's coming into every state in the union that's costing lives. And so while Congress has a role to play in the days ahead on a broad range of issues, my hope is that they focus on offering solutions that'll move our country back to the security and prosperity that we experienced during the Trump-Pence years.
Thank you.
Good conversation there. Danielle also asked the former vice president when he might make a formal announcement on a presidential campaign. His answer, soon. Coming up, more tax cuts could be coming your way. Indiana's legislative leaders tell us what we can expect this session. Welcome back. State lawmakers on Tuesday gathered for their annual organization day. As expected, they re-elected House Speaker Todd Huston and Senate President Pro Tem Rod Bray to their posts. Our Garrett Berquist found out tax cuts and public health funding are in the cards this year.
We haven't even gotten the state revenue forecast yet, and already lawmakers are floating income and property tax cuts. This would continue a discussion that began last session.
We recognize, the property tax cap system has been great for residents. The explosion of assessed valuations has presented some challenges. So Chairman Thompson and the committee are looking at ways that we can provide some property tax relief to Hoosiers, recognize that they're going to want it, and we'll have more details as we come back in January.
On the business property tax, is that going to be essentially a rerun of what you tried to do last session?
Well, I think it'll be part of a broader discussion around property taxes in general. We're going to have to get in and make some changes. We feel like that's one where we can make changes. We recognize and understand the concerns of local governments. We want to try to address those within this process too.
When you mentioned income tax cuts before, were you talking about the ones already scheduled, or perhaps?
Yeah, well, I mean, we obviously have them scheduled, and we'll see where the forecast comes in and see if it provides us with any flexibility. We certainly will continue the scheduled reduction in income taxes.
So this time you're not ruling out further income tax?
I would never want to rule anything out, but we'll see what the forecast shows, and what we'll have priorities over the next couple of months that we'll lay out, and we'll see where we are.
Because people's property values are going up, so that's encouraging. But the impact that it has on people and the bill they have to pay twice a year can be really, really challenging, and the impact it has on their mortgage under the circumstances when they have a mortgage and the property taxes are paid through that. So we'll take a serious look at that, trying to provide some relief to people. We have to be super careful, obviously, that the impact that has on local governments and schools, because they rely a lot on those property tax dollars.
I always tell people property taxes is a beast of local government more than it is the state of Indiana. If we do anything with property taxes, remember, we're going to affect people at the local level more than we are here at the state level. The state doesn't receive a lot of property tax revenue. So as far as property taxes go, I think we should leave that up to the local officials and let them handle that property taxes at the local level. It's kind of ironic that we're sitting here talking about businesses needing something, yet again, from the citizens of the state of Indiana. So what are we going to do? We're going to invest in giving them another tax break so that they can hire more people? Well, now they're saying they don't have enough people. Are we going to finally recognize that it's important for traditional K-12 education to be funded at the levels that it needs to be, so that the workforce that we have for the future is adequate for the companies that we continue to attract to the state of Indiana?
Senate leaders also spoke at length about public health funding. The Governor's Public Health Commission recommends lawmakers provide an additional $240 million for that purpose. Senate President Pro Tem Rod Bray balked that figure at a Monday panel discussion, but appeared to backtrack the next day.
It might be. I mean, $240 million a year is a lot of money. If you take that over the biennium, of course, that's $480 million, and that's not a small amount of cash. So the thing that we have to make sure of is that we can get that money distributed out to the local health departments, and then they can do a lot of good with it. We don't want to. That's a big change right off the bat. So you may see. We'll have a conversation about whether we can do all of that at once. The magic about that $480 million over the biennium, $240 a year, is that puts us on the national average. And so that puts us in a footing far beyond where we are and have been over the last several years. So it's worthwhile to try and get there. We'll try to.
I don't think they're even going to come close to $240 million a year. Let's just be honest about it, okay? You have to have the wherewithal to put forth those issues that were associated with the study, the healthcare study. You have to have hospitals that are dealing with the mental health services. You have to have jails that can deal with mental health services. Listen, if you just went to our jails and said, hey, anybody in here who has a mental health problem, there's a facility 5 miles down the road and we're going to help them, you'd probably get 80% of their prisoners. That's a shame. And we have not addressed it. We've let our jails get overcrowded. We've allowed people to walk the streets who really are just can't afford their medication. And now we all of a sudden want to fix it? No, we should have never let it get to this point. But I think they're going to spend the resources to fully fund what we need to do? No, not at all.
For his part, House Minority Leader Phil Giaquinta told the Indiana Chamber of Commerce last week he doesn't want a repeat of the 2022 session, dominated by debates over transgender athletes, abortion access, and how schools teach about race and racism.
Stemming, in my opinion, the kind of the brain drain, the thing that I mentioned earlier that I'm concerned about, that college graduates are leaving the state, and I think we need to do everything we can to make sure our folks are staying here. And part of that has to be with, frankly, let's give the social issues a rest this session. We just come out of a very contentious special session back in July, August, and I don't think, frankly, it does our state any good that we are on the national news with these type of issues.
I think we'll have, there'll be a whole collection of bills that will be filed, and I'm sure both sides will want to weigh in on social issues, but this is a budget session. That's where I think the vast majority of the focus is going to be.
So are we going to avoid things like CRT this year? Or?
We'll see we'll see what the agenda shapes out like, what the conversations are like, but again, I think the focus will be heavily on the budget.
Lawmakers won't be back at the State House until January 9th, and they have to wait for Governor Eric Holcomb to submit his proposed budget before they start crunching numbers. At the State House, Garrett Bergquist, Wish TV, wishtv.com, and follow us on Facebook.
Well, coming up, another candidate enters the growing race for mayor of Indianapolis, this time on the Republican ticket. And welcome back to All Indiana Politics. We turn now to next year's race for the mayor of Indianapolis. Joe Hogsett has more competition for his bid for a third term in office. Pastor James Jackson of Fervent Prayer Ministries is running as a Republican. Pastor James Jackson, we appreciate you taking some time and joining us here for All Indiana Politics, sir.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
So you haven't made the formal announcement yet, but all indications are that you are planning on making this announcement here relatively soon. Why jump into this race?
Well, I'm excited about it, and I have a vision to transform Indianapolis into one of the best cities to live in the United States of America. When you Google best places to live in this nation, Indianapolis is not at the top of the list. And as mayor, I plan to change that.
How?
Well, there's several areas. I've called my Mayor James Jackson Peace Plan. And I know people in our city want peace. And that involves public safety. It involves education. It involves achievement. It involves community. And it involves economic development. And I'm working on fleshing all of that out and having the community to help me with that, to make sure that we have a good plan to get to where we want to be.
To move the conversation forward, what are your thoughts on the job that Mayor Hogsett has done over the past several years?
Well, Mayor Hogsett hasn't reached the goals that he set for himself. Back in 2015, he had indicated in a news article that he felt that 2 terms was enough to get everything done that a mayor would want to get done. And now he's going for a 3rd term. He just hasn't been able to take care of the most important responsibility for any mayor, and that's public safety. His public safety record is worse than any mayor in the history of the city of Indianapolis.
For folks at home who maybe don't know, what is your background when it comes to public safety? I know you were pretty involved in the prior administration.
Yeah, well, it's a great question. My first involvement in public safety, I was appointed to the Board of Public Safety by Mayor Greg Ballard. And shortly thereafter, I was appointed to the Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Merit Board, which is the governing body for the police department. I did 4 years term on that. I also have worked very closely with several groups, crime prevention groups here in the city of Indianapolis to combat crime. I also created the Clean for Green program, which was the catalyst for Mayor Hogsett developing the Project Indy program. In fact, Project Indy is a model of the program I created called Clean for Green back in 2012, which was very effective, according to former Chief Rick Hite. In 2015, which was the height of our program, juvenile crime was almost non-existent. We had over 20 zip codes of youth that we were mentoring and employing in Indianapolis.
I don't have to tell you, but Marion County, Indianapolis, predominantly, it's a blue county. So how do you, as a Republican, plan to win it over?
Well, first of all, trusting God for that, much prayer. But at the end of the day, I think beyond blue and red, people, we want the same thing. People want peace. People want to be able to walk to the grocery store. People want to be able to enjoy their families and not have to worry about their homes being broken into. People want to be able to get gas and not have to worry about their car being stolen while they're inside getting gas. And Indianapolis has become a place that's very, very dangerous. And we've got to take care of that. And Indianapolis is different from a lot of cities across America because I hear Mayor Hogsett say quite often, our problems are not unique. However, at least twice in the history of this city, in the 90s and the mid 2000s, we were able to overcome that problem. And so despite the fact that we are here again and it's worse than it's ever been, the issue is leadership, and we need transformative leadership. And I am that transformative leader. Something
else I want to ask you about, and it comes from a recent interview that you gave. You said you want to change the perception of the Republican Party within the Black community. What do you mean by that?
Well, it's very difficult for Black people who want to be or Republicans. I've seen that with a lot of my colleagues. I've seen that with people who are in the Republican Party who are Black, even on a national level. And I would like for people to understand that Black people have a rich heritage in the Republican Party. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with being a Republican. The perception is not good. And I think that I can help make that change.
I have one more question before I let you go, and I appreciate you taking some time. Have you had conversations with the GOP here in Marion County?
Oh, absolutely. Well, first of all, I'm a student or a graduate of the diversity program the GOP did. Before this last one, I was in the inaugural class. And last August, I met with Joe Ellsner, who is the chairman of the local party. And then we also had a conversation this past October. So we've had some great conversations, not with just Joe, but other folks in the Republican Party as well.
Okay, and we'll wait to hear if they give you their support, right? I would imagine.
I hope so. I think it will be beneficial to all of us.
Yeah. Okay, Pastor James Jackson, we really appreciate you taking some time. We'll talk soon.
Thank you.
Take All Indiana Politics on the go with you. Download our podcast now. Part of the All Indiana Podcast Network and allindianapodcastnetwork.com.
All right, thank you for joining us for All Indiana Politics this week. We'll be back here next Sunday morning at 9:30. We also want you to join us for Monday Night Football here on Wish TV. It's Colts versus the Steelers. Game starts at 8 o'clock. We'll have pre-game coverage throughout the day and, of course, post-game coverage as well, both on air here at Wish TV and over online at wishtv.com. Have a great rest of your weekend.